Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/heroes, villains, and sidekicks. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Episode 43, Eugene Root, or better known as Arseface. This week on the Heroes, Villains, and Sidekicks show, I'll be continuing my Preacher series with a character with probably the most unique look and name from the entire series. Now, there's some pretty far out characters in Preachers, but Eugene Root, or again better known as Arseface, definitely has one of the most interesting looks and backstories in the comic. So who is Eugene Root, and how did he go from handsome young stoner to the man he is today? Let's get into it. But first, I'd like to remind everybody, if you get a second, head over to iTunes and subscribe and leave a review. Or, of course, you can go to Google Play or Stitcher. But if you could head over to iTunes and leave a review, that would help us move up the rankings. More people would find out about the podcast, and that's good for everybody. So if you get a chance, head over to iTunes and please leave a review. And again, don't forget, if you head over to the site, heroesvillainsandsidekicks.com, you can go to the episodes page, and there is a post for every episode we've done. And in those posts are tons of pages from the comic books or the comics I'm describing, and also video clips if it's a show. So head over to heroesvillainsandsidekicks.com for that. Okay, let's get into Arseface. That sounded, that came out probably not like I thought I was going to. Arseface made his first appearance. It's going to sound so ridiculous, me saying that we'll be calling him Eugene for a little bit, but Arseface made his first appearance in Vertigo's Preacher comic, created by Garth Ennis and the late, great Steve Dillon, in issue 2, titled And Hell Followed Him. And he actually appears in 35 of the 66 issues in the run, so he's in this book quite a bit. Now, in issue 2, we get a quick sort of one-page summary of the character's backstory as told by a police sheriff to another officer, I think an FBI person, but it's pretty quick and they don't really go much into it. So how do I know that there's more? Well, the creators of Preacher not only, like we've talked about, made this incredible series, but they also did a number of one-shots that highlighted many of the characters in the series and really fleshed out their origins. And Arseface's, or Eugene Root's, is one of them, and it's awesome. It's one of my favorite ones. So let's start there. We'll start at his origin in the one-shot, and then we'll go through his arc in the comic. And then, of course, we'll touch on how the character is portrayed on the AMC show. Now, remember to check out the site, heroesvillainsandsidekicks.com, because I've added a ton of pages from Preacher, from the one-shot, and clips from the AMC show. Eugene's backstory takes place in the one-shot, The Story of You-Know-Who, which was written by Garth Ennis and drawn by one of my favorite artists, Richard Case. Now, Rich's art just really suits the period this book takes place and the characters. Now, Eugene's origin takes place in 1994, the time of grunge rock, and it's at the height of Nirvana and Kurt Cobain's, fame and influence. Now, when we first meet Eugene, the first thing that hits you is just how good looking this kid is. I mean, great features, angular, long shoulder-length hair, good looking kid all the way around. Now, Eugene grew up in Annville, Texas, where, kids, are fairly cruel, obviously. He's a kid that likes rap music and grunge music, and he hangs out with his friend, believe it or not, who is nicknamed Pube. This is going to be an interesting show. Arseface and Pube. Of course, he's not Arseface then, but they smoke the occasional joint and have the occasional beer. Now, unfortunately, the kid here, Eugene, has a father and mother that do not make his life easy, and that is an understatement. Eugene's dad is the local sheriff, and for all intents and purposes is just a pretty horrible human being. Now, Sheriff Root is very disappointed with his son. He feels that Eugene is lazy and listens to the wrong music and makes no bones about how he feels, constantly telling his son what a loser he is and how much of a waste of life he is. He's a horrible, horrible father and horrible person. The man doesn't just mentally abuse his son, but he also beats Eugene on a regular basis whenever he feels Eugene has especially let him down, or really when he's had too much to drink, and he drinks a lot. For example, like most days, he comes home, beats on Eugene, grabs a few bottles of bourbon, and he sits in his lawn chair with a shotgun in his lap, screaming into the air, and I quote, he wants to destroy all these N-word Martians. Yeah, on top of all that, he is a racist, a horrible racist and person. When you find out what happens to this guy, you heard a little bit about it in the episode 40, and I have to say I actually made a mistake in that episode. I don't know what I was talking about, but you'll find out what really happened in this one to him, and it's even better. So, yep, big racist. Now, where's his mother when all this is happening? I mean, she's been beaten down by life at this point. She's lived with this man. He's a horrible person. God knows what he does to her. They never show anything, but I think he just ignores her. And he's probably done horrible things. She's just pretty much crawled into the bottle, takes Valium. She's a big church person. She even asks her priest, for help. And he just says, grin and bear it. It's all God's will. So she does. She just drinks and ignores things, which is horrible for Eugene. Now, I mentioned Eugene's friend Pube. Yep, that's his nickname. So these two are really an island unto themselves in this small Texas town. Again, they love rap and they love grunge. They especially love Kurt Cobain. So they get bullied a lot by the school jocks. Here's this kid, Eugene. He's got no mother to speak of. His father beats him, doesn't love him. I mean, he has nothing. It doesn't really have any other friends but Pube. And he really has no break from any of that when he's at school because people, are beat him up there. He's constantly getting picked on and beat up. And it's no wonder that he starts this path to where we see him in Preacher number 2. Now, after taking an especially bad beating from his father, Eugene decides he is going to live with Pube. Pube offered. He doesn't sound like he's got the best home life either, but at least it's stable enough where, Eugene would feel safe there. Now, so he goes there, and he actually, before Pube shows up, Eugene is actually talking to Pube's sister, who looks a little bit older, but you almost think there might be a chemistry happening there. He also then finds out that Pube is actually just turned, I want to say 16. So he's a couple years younger than Eugene, which kind of surprises him. And then the sister sort of says, yeah, Pube's young, but he's very charismatic and has sort of a gravity. So she should be careful. But, as they're sort of really learning about each other, that all ends when the dad just kicks the door in and drags the boy out by his hair. Now, the sister's going to call the police, but she realizes he is the police and she's the dad, and it's not good. So, this is, he gets just the crap kicked out of him when he gets home. The mother, of course, does nothing. Now, the next day or so, he gets a call from Pube, who tells him that Kurt Cobain has just killed himself by, of course, a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Now, they're both devastated, and, Pube at this point also, in the height of this sort of sorrow and just confusion about Kurt Cobain doing this, he gets the crap kicked out of him when he tries to stick up for himself and for Eugene by the bullies. And at this point, he's just done. And unfortunately, he's a kid and he doesn't realize things are going to get better. Things will get better. Or at least when you're a little older, you can start making some decisions. So instead of knowing these things, And I guess technically sometimes things don't get better. But, you know, he goes a different way, and he tells Eugene that he should steal his dad's shotgun after he passes out so they can just end it all and go out like they're idle. And Eugene does take the gun, and the two of them are drinking in the park. And, Eugene is talking to Pube, and he just yells off panel, "I'm coming, Kurt, I'm coming." And the next panel shows him with the gun in his mouth and Pube, and he just blows his brains out. Eugene is horrified, and he kneels and he puts the gun under his chin, and he pulls the trigger, and things go black. But to his surprise, he awakens through a haze of medication and gauze to see his father, Pube's sister, and a doctor standing over him. Now, if you or he or we were expecting any kind of sympathy, let's just say his father's first comment, and this is a quote, "Should have put it in your mouth, you dumb little F word." So, this guy is just, he's horrible. Later, Eugene is asked by Pube's sister, who's just crying, why they did it. And Eugene scribbles in a little notepad that scribbles, "Nobody cares." Now, she loses it, calling him, a kid and overdramatic and not caring about what other people think. And then she really floors him by saying, if you could do that to yourself and create this wake of misery in this amount of misery in your wake, then you didn't care either. And this really floors him. Of course, we only have one eye that's showing through the gauze, but you can see that this is something that really has a huge change in Eugene. So what I mean is, the traumatic experience of losing his friend and an attempted suicide, and this revelation that he didn't care, just like, he thinks no one else did, changes Eugene's personality dramatically. And who knows, it could also be brain damage. But the next time we see Eugene, 10 operations later, he is a changed man, both emotionally and physically. He's not a sullen, moody, or depressed kid anymore. Now he's super positive. He's a super positive kid, and he loves his dad, and he knows they've got troubles, but he wants to make things work for them. He wants a new shot with his dad, and it's very sweet how just upbeat the kid is. But unfortunately, he shot himself in the face. It took his face off. And after the 10 operations, his face is just severely damaged. I mean, he has pretty much no hair to speak of, a few little strands here and there. They draw him with this large dent in his forehead. And his face was rebuilt and sort of to the point where his mouth is sort of pulled into like a permanent pucker. And this is, of course, what gets him the nickname Arseface. And the other thing that makes the character interesting is that in the comic, and of course in the show we can understand him, but in the comic, due to the reconstruction, he can't really talk. He sort of drools here and there. It all comes out as mumbles. And his words are then added in text boxes by the letterer. So it's really neat. So he says something like, bar, and then in the little box underneath them or in the panel, it says what it spells out what he says, but nobody knows what he's saying. They can't read those, right? They don't know they're in a comic, so they don't know what he's saying. They just sort of are like, what is this person saying? But we know it. It just makes it really interesting. I've never seen anything done like that with a semi-main character in a comic. It's pretty cool. So Sheriff Root is at home, and he's reading a letter from his wife, who just left him, said, "I'm leaving," when Eugene comes in the door and says, "Hey, Dad, I know I totally get that you couldn't pick me up at the hospital. I took a cab. this is, it's sad that mom left, but we are now a team and we're going to go to baseball games and we're going to hang out and we're going to get better, Dad. And it's all, but of course, the dad can't understand him because he's just blah, 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 blah. And it ends with just like on this full splash page with Eugene just saying gibberish, but it's written, "I'm going to be the best son in the whole world." And it's just, and the dad has just got a bottle of bourbon in his hand, the letter in the other, and his head down. And he also said in that little speech that his dream was to like build his relationship back with his dad and for him to become a cop too. And one day they would fight crime together. And it's amazing how he changed, and it took something that horrible to change this kid to make him see what it was life could be like. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like most things in comic books, things do not go well for him through the Preacher series. But I'm going to let you in on a little spoiler, because I probably mentioned it in the other episodes. Episode 40, which was Jesse. Episode 41 was Cassidy. And episode 42 was Tulip. He does have a happy ending after all. As happy as someone whose face looks like that can have. Now that we know the character's backstory, let's look at his arc through the comic series. But first a word from our sponsor. For you, the listeners of the Heroes, Villains, and Sidekicks show, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their services. Now, one book that I just got but I have not listened to yet, I'm looking forward to it, is David Sedaris' Thief by Finding, Diaries 1977 to 2002. I love David Sedaris. I first heard him on This American Life when I was living in North Carolina back in the 90s. And have been a huge, huge fan ever since. I actually have gone to a few of his readings when he's done live events, and I was really looking forward to this. I don't have a huge amount of time right now to be reading it. I do have a decent commute, so I went ahead and got this over at Audible. And if you'd like to get your free audiobook download today, just head over to audibletrial.com, Heroes, Villains, and Sidekicks. Again, that's audibletrial.com, Heroes, Villains, and Sidekicks for your free audiobook. Now back to the show. When we first meet Eugene in the Preacher series, he's with his dad trying to bond. We don't know how much time has passed between when he got home from the hospital and this, but his dad won't even speak to him. So who knows how much time has passed again, but you definitely get the sense that his dad has never spoken to him after he said you should have just put the gun in your mouth. But Eugene, super positive, always trying to sort of bridge that gap with his dad. Now, the sheriff gets a call about a mass murder that was just discovered, and he rides off, but he doesn't realize that Eugene has stowed away in the backseat of his cruiser. Now, the mass murder that we're talking about is one we've talked about in other episodes, episode 40 especially with Jesse. And I don't believe in the Cassidy episode, which was 41. Well, it's the Saint of Killers who just shot up the joint, right? So that's where he's going. So this is putting him on a collision course with the Saint and Jesse. Now, when his dad gets there, he tries to arrest Jesse and Tulip and is being his usual warm self, which is, again, horrible, when the Saint of Killers shows up, who we're going to be doing an episode on, and trains his gun on him, on the sheriff. Now, I would have no problem with Sheriff Root being taken out by the Saint, but, Eugene loves him. So just then, Eugene bursts out of the car yelling, "Don't kill my dad." But, of course, you got to remember, I know I keep saying this because it's just so funny. Nobody knows what he said. It's literally gibberish coming out of his mouth as he's waving his arms. So again, nobody gets it, but it does give Jesse time to use the word of God, the Genesis, right, to stop the Saint. That is also when there is this small inset panel where he's running, "Don't kill my dad," where it shows Cassidy, and he just says, "That kid has a face like an arse." And there you go. That's how he got his name, Arseface. And which is pretty funny because it's this little tiny panel in the page. And When all's said and done, though, and we know that the saint takes off because Jesse uses the word, and Jesse, he's being a little. I don't think at this point, because he just really got it, doesn't know the power of the word and what it means, or maybe he does, but he tells the sheriff to go F himself, and he's using the word. And of course, he does just that. The next time we see Root, he's in an ambulance, and the EMT is talking to Arseface about his dad's condition. It's then that Arseface learns that his dad is going to be fine, although the bad news is they cannot reattach his penis. The good news is they should be able to get it out of his colon. Yep, you do as you are told when Jesse uses the word. Now, I did make a mistake in episode 40. I said he put his gun up there, but no, I don't know why I said that. He cut his penis off and did exactly what Jesse told him to do. Now, Arseface is upset, but at the same time, he is overjoyed when he hears his father call from him. Again, I think this is the first time he's talked to him since he told him he should have killed himself better. He's thrilled, and his dad asks Arseface to get him his gun, and of course, being a good son, he goes and gets it. And once the sheriff gets it, he just proceeds pretty much to blow his brains out. He kills himself. And Eugene is inconsolable. He grabs his dad's gun and he runs off. And it's later in that at the end of that issue that he swears very dramatically with the gun and rain that he is going to find Jesse Custer and he is going to kill him. Again, it's just the lettering is so amazing because it's just this gibberish, but it looks so dramatic because of how it's the bold and the big text. But then there's a little box that you need to read to see what he's really saying. So again, head over to the site Heroes, Villains, and Sidekicks.com, and I've got that page there because it's a funny one, but it's also sad. I mean, his dad is dead. He's pretty much alone now. I mean, you're never going to see the mother again in the book. The kid's on his own. So Arseface takes his dad's gun and begins to travel America to find Custer and get some justice for his dad. And he actually finally runs into the group by accident, and he draws on Jesse, pulls the gun. But instead of everyone being scared, they just laugh. And in the end, Arseface just can't bring himself to kill someone in cold blood, probably at all. And he lowers the gun. And Jesse realizes at that point, like he will in with another character that we're going to talk about that's part of the Grail. It's one of my favorite things in the comic. We'll get into that later, though, a different episode. They realize he's a good kid, and he's messed up, and they realize probably what his dad was, and they feel sorry for him, and he probably needs a friend. So they are heading to New Orleans to search for God because they've got some clues he might be there, or someone who might know where he is there. And they take him along. And it is a grand time. It's a big road trip. They sing in the car. They get there. They eat gumbo. They drink. And the gang even gets Arseface laid. It's his first time. And so, Arseface loses his virginity in the Big Easy thanks to Jesse. Now, he did it with a bag over his head. But hey, beggars can't be choosers. The woman of the night has him have a bag over his head, or she can't. She throws up. So it's. But hey, he's having fun, probably for the first time in his life, and if that wasn't enough, his life changes again on this huge scale when they're walking down the street. There's a band playing. They're up on a balcony. They see him, and for whatever reason, they say, "Come on up and join us," and he does. And as we all know, no one can understand him, right? It all just sounds like gibberish or just sounds. He starts screaming and belting it out into that microphone and loving it, because he was a huge music fan. And the crowd goes insane. They love it. And the band is actually overheard by a music executive who is looking for a quote-unquote fresh young face or a fresh face of music. And he goes ahead and signs Arseface and the band on the spot. Now, after he is signed, Arseface becomes a household name. Arseface, actually. I mean, he doesn't use Eugene, he uses Arseface. He is rich, he is a rock superstar, a rock god. It is hilarious. Mansion, women, everything. Now, this is where the writers throw in a nice twist. Now, some of Arseface's millions of fans decide they want to be like their idol and try to commit suicide and maybe look like him or just commit suicide. So most of them, no matter what they're trying, they die. So there's a mass suicide start happening. Now, he doesn't know any of this is happening because his manager is a dick. And he just starts releasing statements that are really crude and rude, saying these people are idiots if they're trying to kill themselves, stoking controversy, which makes the sales of his albums go through the roof. Now, he's a good manager in that he knows when things are about to come to an end. The manager steals all of Arseface's money and leaves the country. Now, where does this leave Arseface? Broke again. I guess he didn't care. He loved the music, but he's broke and he's in the same place as he was, alone, and kind of lost. He knows he isn't going to take revenge on Jesse. He also doesn't want to be responsible for people killing themselves when he finds out that's what's happening. So he doesn't have music anymore. So he just sort of, still happy as all get out and positive, he hits the road and just sort of wanders. So he kicks around for a bit and he ends up hanging his hat in all places, a town called Salvation, Texas, right? If you're going to go someplace for salvation, I guess you go to Salvation, Texas. So he ends up being there, and it's there he comes across a girl being hassled by some bullies. And he knows what this is like. Not even so much like now, because now he lets that stuff roll off him. When people say mean things about him, he just wants to be their friend. But back when he was Eugene, he knew what it was like to be picked on. And he comes to her aid. And it's then he meets Lori Bobbs, who cannot remember. I know I just reread these or skimmed this part. It's probably more likely through some type of inbreeding, but she only has one eye. I think it is, actually. I think she's a character we saw really, really early in the comic when Jesse was little and they used to play together, and her brother. But she has one eye. But it doesn't matter to Eugene. He is instantly smitten with her, and she with him. Now you're saying, okay, yes, Eugene is a good person. He has got a great heart. But again, if you head over to heroesvillainsandsidekicks.com and you look at the episodes page and the post for this and you see what he looks like, it's even more sort of gruesome than on the show. So how does she overlook this and, fall in love? Well, here's the thing. She has a disorder due to the whole one eye thing. They don't really go into explaining it. They just say it's a disorder, that the visual information that travels through her eye, because there's just one of them or whatnot, and how it was wired in her head, it translates visual information before it gets to her brain, so she sees things differently. Sometimes she might see a car and it's a guy riding on it like it's an elephant. But how she sees Eugene is he looks incredibly handsome. I would have loved it if they had drawn him like he looked back in the one shot. But either way, it's cool. When she sees him, she sees this blonde, blue-eyed, just handsome guy. She really sees who Eugene is on the inside. This great heart, but outside. So that's what she sees, and she loves him. And in the end, through everything that he went through, it was so awesome that he ended up finding love and happiness. And that's the cool thing about all the characters in the book that deserve it. Don't get me wrong, there's some characters that deserve to be happy that didn't end up being happy. But for the main cast, they come out okay. And no other character, no character even more so than Eugene, that I want to have a happy ending, and it was great that he did. Now, how does the comic origin compare to the origin on the AMC show? It's pretty different. Yes, the character is still this sort of upbeat kid. I'm not sure I'm happy with the makeup job. It looks a little too clean, a little too much like a prosthetic. I mean, it's this really pronounced pucker that the skin has been sort of formed into. And I don't know, just think it just looks like a mask to me. I'm not super happy with it. Maybe they'll tweak it in the second season. I've just started it and I haven't seen what it looks like. It's still pretty, it's still very disfiguring face, accidental, face that made it look like this. But at the same time, I don't think I like the makeup. I'm curious what you think. I've read a little bit here and there what people think. Do you think the makeup looks weird? Or do you think it looks too plasticky, too much like a mask? You can go ahead and leave it in the comments over on the site. But origin-wise is also pretty different. And again, I think they needed to do this. Maybe did they not want to do something about teen suicide? I don't know. They do a lot of crazy crap on this show, so maybe that's a third rail they don't want to talk about. But they do in a way. I don't know. It's confusing. I guess what they probably didn't want to do is they wanted to make his character not have such a dark past. Well, so what happens? Now, in the show, Eugene is played by Ian Coletti, and he doesn't try to commit suicide over his home life and Cobain. I mean, since it's not the 90s on the show, I mean, there's no Cobain, right? That doesn't matter. He does it over a girl. But it's kind of confusing. In the first season, Jesse informs us that Eugene was in love with a girl who spurned him and in the end shot her. But she survived, but he shot her. And then tried to kill himself, and this happened. We meet the girl, and she's in this vegetative state in season 1. And I had a really big problem with this, that they would have made Eugene into someone who would shoot somebody, like shoot his girlfriend. It just didn't sit right with me, and I didn't care for it. Plus, how would he be free? I didn't like it. But this season, we learn something new while Eugene is living out his worst day in hell. Why is he in hell? In an outburst of anger, Jesse accidentally uses the word and tells him to go to hell, and he does. Take a look at the site for some great video clips. That part was pretty cool. I have to say that of all the characters in the show so far, the one I do not like how they translated over to the show from the comic is Eugene. But, yep, he is in hell and he is reliving his worst day. And, yep, it's that fateful day. But here we learn what I guess is the truth. Maybe we'll see. Eugene, in this, sort of loop that he's on, Eugene goes to Tracy's house, this is the girl, because she's told him she plans on killing herself because her boyfriend dumped her. Now, Eugene talks her out of it, and she's crying, and she puts her head on his shoulder. But Eugene mistakes this for something else, maybe that, she likes him, and he goes in for a kiss. And this, for some reason, again, I didn't really care for this, but for some reason upsets her so much that she decides to go through with her suicide attempt, and she shoots herself. Again, she doesn't die. We know that she's just in a vegetative state. Now, at this point, Tracy's mom is beating on the door. She's screaming. Eugene, he tries to get out the window. He can't. They're too high up. He knows he'll probably be blamed for this. Why, I'm not sure, but it's, whatever. And he does kind of what we see in the comic when he puts the gun up to his head and pulls the trigger. And, now his face looks the way it does after many episodes. Now, a lot of his life is still the same. His dad's a racist prick, but not as bad in the comic. And, I don't care for how they did this to Eugene. Yes, his first origin is tragic and horrible, but it kind of made sense. This one, I don't know. It seemed kind of clunky. I'm curious again what you thought of this. If you guys have any feelings about this, but due to this, people in town hate him. Again, I don't think they think that he shot her, but they think maybe something weird happened. Either way, they hate him. They hate how he looks, but he's still super positive. And the Eugene in that way from the comic, at least that. I'm hoping that, things as the show wind through work out in the end as well for the AMC Eugene as they did in the comic Eugene. Well, I want to thank you for listening to this episode of the Heroes, Villains, and Sidekicks show. This has been one of my favorite episodes in the Preacher series. I love this character. Look forward to some more episodes. We're going to be doing more one on Hair Star, some of the characters from the Grail, Featherstone, and those type of people. We're of course going to be doing one on the Saint of Killers, and then I think we're going to finish up with Genesis. Before Genesis, I do want to throw in some one episode that's probably just going to be tackling some of the little ancillary characters, little tiny characters that might have only showed up in 3 or 4 pages, or maybe an arc here or there. So that'll be before Genesis. I think we'll wrap it up with Genesis. Maybe Genesis and God. Although, I don't know if we can do the origin of God in the comic there, but we're definitely going to do Genesis. So again, I really appreciate it. You listening to the episode. Again, head over to iTunes, leave a review. Head over to the site, heroesvillainsandsidekicks.com, to see tons of pages from this episode over on the episodes page. Again, thank you. I really appreciate you listening. I love doing this podcast. We'll be back next week with more. Thanks.